In your list of the, was it 5 things?
Mm-hmm.
They mentioned the Wall Street raping. This is Bloomberg.com. Of all places, Bloomberg financial website. Wall Street aristocracy got $1.2 trillion in secret loans. Citigroup and Bank of America were the reigning champions of finance in 2006 as home prices peaked, leading the 10 biggest U.S. banks and brokerage firms to their best year ever with $104 billion of profits. By 2008, the housing market's collapse forced those companies to take more than 6 times as much, $669 million. Well, unfortunately, they weren't doing a 69 with us. In emergency loans from the U.S. Federal Reserve, the loans dwarfed the $160 billion in public bailouts to top 10. The top 10 got from the U.S. Treasury. Yet until now, the full amounts have remained secret. You know those balls are slapping your ass.
Yeah. Just blatant, open criminality. The criminal's in charge.
Now, jumping back to a local level, and the little police state fiefdoms that we all have to deal with at the everyday life level, you sent me these links, and now we've talked about, the increasing criminalization of photography. There's been the case of the cameras confiscated at a press conference. I think it was a city council meeting, and just this whole idea that they're protecting someone's privacy. But you sent me this link, 2 links actually, that really this is just bizarre. I mean, we've all heard about people being stopped for photographing national monuments or anything in particular,
like anything
that the authorities think somehow makes you likely to be a possible terrorist. And here we have 2 very, very strange articles from Long Beach Post. That's lbpost.com. One is Long Beach police on lookout for photos with, quote, no apparent aesthetic value. That's right.
Yeah.
The police are looking for people taking photos with no apparent aesthetic value.
Now the cops are art critics? Ridiculous.
And they've got this great picture here that's of a rusting metal, big steel bolts in a classic sailor naval portal there. What do you think of this photo of a refinery by photographer Sandra Roscoe Wolf? Apparently Long Beach police don't think very highly of it. Wolf was detained after capturing it last month, and now the police chief is saying that stopping photographers for photos with, quote, no apparent aesthetic value is part of department policy. The Long Beach Post writes, quote, this article is reproduced over at, that's right, Petapixel. That's where this is from. But the original article is quoted here as saying, quote, if an officer sees someone taking pictures of something like a refinery, says Police Chief Jim McConnell, it is incumbent upon the officer to make contact with the individual. McConnell went on to say that whether said contact becomes detainment depends on the circumstances the officer encounters. McDonnell says that while there is no police training specific to determining whether a photographer's subject has, quote, apparent aesthetic value, officers make such judgments based, quote unquote, based on their overall training and experience, and will generally approach photographers not engaging in regular tourist behavior.
Can you imagine how surreal it would be to get into a discussion of aesthetics, an argument about art with a cop? Why do I feel I would come out on the losing end?
Why are you photographing that sprinkler head? Because
and try to
cool,
explain
dude.
it,
No, but the thing that struck me is the picture they chose here is of a rusting industrial environment. And you know what? There's a huge crowd of people, myself included, who kind of fetishize decaying structures like this. Remember last time you were here, I had the desktop image of the kind of rusting shed, or rather rusting shack in the sheet metal shack in the misty woods. Well, it reminds me like David Lynch. He has a whole photo series of if you go on road trips across America, you inevitably see these rusting, hulking industrial monoliths.
Or old painted signs on brick. Used to be. You saw a lot of those over the years. They gradually disappeared, but these Coke ads that were painted
Murals.
on the sides of brick buildings. Beautiful artwork. All kinds of old ads on brick buildings that, you don't see them very much anymore. But that old buildings are fascinating and they're beautiful. Can be, and of course, you can transform anything through art, and art doesn't have to be beautiful. That's the whole ridiculousness about this. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah,
the presumption of the police. They're going to decide what has aesthetic value. Amazing.
Yeah.
There's something here I've got that actually it's a story about something we've talked about that's another terrible development of the over-criminalization of everything in society, but there's something good in this story. And for that reason, I think it would be good to not close the show without touching on this. But we were talking earlier about how they're just criminalizing everything. They've criminalized lemonade stands. Now cops are going to decide whether or not a photograph has aesthetic value. And well, one thing we've talked about before here many times has been the criminalization of ordinary school disciplinary matters. How you've got, there are police in schools these days. There weren't when I was growing up.
More when I was.
Yeah, but they're everywhere now.
Undercover maybe, but I.
It really began to get started, according to this article, in the 90s, and that's when the zero tolerance policies, along with these little police states that they literally turned schools into, began to arrest children, fine them, send them to court for all kinds of offenses, very minor things, such as being involved in a scuffle on a school bus. There's one case here where a girl sprayed herself with perfume when the classmates said she smelled. Just a child in unauthorized possession of a soda pop, and these end up going to court. And with fines, $300, $500, and you've got a woman that's got a child who has an attention deficit disorder and bipolar, and he gets into trouble a little more often, and she can't pay these fines, and it does all this harm to children. It talks about here, it doesn't, common sense would tell you this, but it's backed up by research. It says here, research shows that students who have been arrested or appeared in court are more likely to drop out of high school. Yeah, I don't blame them. Said Gary Sweeten, an Arizona State University criminologist. Dropouts, in turn, are more likely than graduates to be incarcerated or unemployed. It's unnecessary, and they're doing this to a lot of really perfectly good kids, and they've been doing it now for a number of years, and it's getting worse and worse, and it's finally getting some attention. Quoting U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder, he says this is clearly something that's got to stop, because what's happening is it's just clogging the courts. It says the federal focus comes amid other change. In Colorado, a legislative task force is examining discipline practices, including law enforcement referrals and school ticketing. Los Angeles police recently agreed to cut back on ticketing tardy students en route to school. Connecticut officials have begun screening cases after students wound up in court on violations such as for having soda, running in the hall, and dressing improperly. Imagine that.
Those are just rules. Those aren't laws.
Yeah, it's outrageous. It's not that we don't think these things should be handled, said William Carbone, the state's executive director of court support services. We just think they should be handled in the school rather than the court. But it talks here how Texas is one of the worst. And this is a rather long article. We have the link on the site, this is a good beginning, but more has to be done. This has become this zero tolerance attitude has become a deeply entrenched police state policy in these little, training grounds for prisons that our schools have been turned into. But it's good that it has been recognized as such, and there are efforts underway to curb this. In other words, finally, zero tolerance for zero tolerance.
Yay! I can get behind that.
Yeah.
Extremism against extremism.
Yeah.
I hate hate.
True crime. I've been wanting to read this headline. You don't get many like this. Semi-truck crashes into Ohio adult store to steal $800 vagina. My God.
I'm a little surprised Raw Story covered that.
How could you not? We covered it just now.
Raw Story has tried in the past to be more focused on real issues in foreign policy and civil liberties issues. But sadly, I know for a fact that there are elements within rawstory.com's staff. Actually, I guess it's more not their staff so much as their higher-ups who have decided, well, the way to get a little more traffic is to go with things like that.
Yeah.
No offense,
That'll
Raw
do it.
Story.
It'll get us more traffic, too, you notice.
Yes, vagina will get us more traffic.
Maybe not the traffic we want. And then there's the dog that ate 10 grand worth of diamonds, which just goes to show you some shit is more valuable than others because the owner did have to follow the dog around. And
I hope it didn't hurt the dog.
No, apparently the dog's
sharp edges,
okay.
and it seems like that would, that they say that, they like stuff. Diamonds can cut glass. What will it do to your intestines?
Well, I don't know, but the dog had very expensive taste.
So here's a flashback to May of this year. Apple of my eye, U.S. fancies a huge metaphor repository. I don't think we covered this. I remember seeing it or hearing about it, but I hadn't really looked much into it. But this was reported at networkworld.com, the U.S. Intelligence Advanced Research Project's activity, building a system to understand human metaphorical speech. Very, very strange story. The group, which develops high-risk reward research projects for the government, says metaphor programming shape how people think about complex topics and can influence beliefs, reduce the complexity of meaning associated with a topic by capturing or expressing patterns, show uncovered, inferred meanings and worldviews of particular groups or individuals, characterization of disparities in social issues and contrasting political goals, yada, yada, yada. In the end, the program should produce a methodology, tools, and techniques together with a prototype system that will identify metaphors that provide insight into cultural beliefs. Okay, now flash forward to this month. Wired's Danger Room seems to so cryptically tap into all of our techno-dystopia fetishisms. Exclusive, Google CIA invest in future of web monitoring. Actually, this is from July 28th, 2010? Oh, man, I'm in a time warp here. And now I'm remembering hearing more about this, but the investment arm of the CIA and Google are both backing a company that monitors the web in real time and says it uses that information to predict the future. There's some really cool videos you can find linked to this subject, and it's an area that I know you and I have talked about, at least off air and I think on air, how right after 9/11 I got together with several of my technology friends and consciousness research friends because I was aware of the precognitive dreams that people were having associated with 9/11.
Yeah.
And I felt if we could only data mine the web as well as the dream reports of psychotherapists, we might be able to predict certain traumatic, world-shaking events. And then, of course, I found out about George Orr and the WebBots project that does exactly that, except in a very arcane, reading the tea leaves kind of a way, but it's been fascinating to watch over the last 10 years. And, of course, I've known that, the government's total information awareness and similar other data mining projects have, I thought, perhaps approached that same kind of approach through massive NSA-style supercomputing, IBM-style supercomputing, churning of the data, looking for patterns and so forth. And this company that their article here is talking about is doing just that.